Hello, students. So, welcome to the University Physics 2 lab course. In this session, I'm trying to explain how to use a multimeter. The multimeter, by the name itself, shows that it's a meter used to measure multiple things like voltages, currents, resistances. It can also be used to do a bunch of other stuff like the continuity test. It can be used to measure temperatures. We won't be using the measurement of temperatures with the multimeter. So let's get to the basics of the multimeter. So when you look at the multimeter, which you can see here, and you have, I hope this is clear, you have a common terminal here which is the negative. So the black goes into the common terminal. The black always goes into the common terminal. That's where it stays. And the red has two positions. It can go to either here or on the other side. Most of the time we'll use it here because, as you can see, this is where you put it when you want to measure voltage, resistance, and very small currents like milliamperes, or even when you're measuring temperatures. So let's put it here. And then you have the other two ends, which you can touch at the points that you want to measure. For example, if you're trying to use it to measure continuity, then you put it across the two points here. Let me show you this, the AC/DC Electronics Lab. You can see that. Now these 2 points, this is backwards, so these 2 points are connected together while this is not connected to this. Okay, so if you test for continuity between these 2 points, it's going to show that it's continuous. But if you test for continuity between these 2 points, it's not continuous. And you got to turn on the multimeter. To turn on the multimeter, and take it to where it says continuity. I'm going to show you that. That's where it shows continuity. As you can see, put the selector switch there and then touch it. Okay. So after you put that, touch it here, and you hear that beeping sound showing there is continuity. But if you touch it on this, there's no beeping, which means there is no continuity. So that's how you use it. What about if you want to measure voltages? Okay, so if you take a careful look, you will see that here you have AC voltage measurements. AC, let me hold it up close and use this to point. Okay, so you see that is AC right there, while on the other side, this is backwards, so here it's all DC. On this side it's DC. Okay, DC voltages. And then down here you have ohms. You see the omega symbol? That is where you have to put the selector to measure resistances. And then if you want to measure the high currents up to 10 ampere, you see that yellow part. It's a dangerous current. We won't be using it. So, and then you can also measure temperatures, as you can see, Fahrenheit and Celsius. And for that, you need a thermocouple which comes with it. We're not going to use it for that. Okay. And here is one of the most important things that you have to remember when you use this multimeter. You have to remember, if you're trying to measure a voltage and you do not know how much the voltage is, you always have to pick the highest voltage scale. Meaning, you have to go to 600 volt. See that? That's where I put it. 600 volt. Can you see that? because you have no idea of what the voltage is. And after you measure it, if you see that the voltage is like 50 volts, then for more accuracy, you move it to, okay, now we know it's less than 200, so you move it to 200 volts. So that's how you always do it. You never put it on the lowest scale. You always put it on the highest scale. And that is applicable for measurement of anything, voltages, currents, or resistances. Another very important thing is that you have to remember to turn it off after you make the measurements. Turn it off. If you do not turn it off, there is a battery included in the multimeter, and that's going to be drained. So remember to always put the selector switch on the off position and turn it on and put it at the point where you want it to, depending on what you're measuring. Now, when it comes to measurement of resistances, if you look at the resistance, you see the color coding on the resistance, which actually gives you the measure of the resistance. So, for example, I have a resistor with me. You can see that now. And the colors on it are brown, black, and black. That's what I see. Brown, black, and black. Okay, let's see if you can see that. Brown, black, and black. And at the other end, you see gold. Okay, so how to figure out the value of the resistance is you have to have this chart that you've been given in the manual. When you look at the chart, you see that each color is represented by a number. Black is 0, brown is 1, and so on down the line. So when you look at this resistance, the first color is brown, so that's the number 1. Next color is black, so the number is 0. So it's 1, 0 now, first digit, second digit. And for the third color, you put as many number of zeros. So in this case, the third color is also black. That means you put 0 zeros. Or in other words, you put no 0. So the value of this resistance is just 10 ohms, because the first digit was brown, which is 1. Second digit is black, which is a 0. Now for the third digit, you put as many zeros. Since the third digit was black, you put no 0, so that's 10 ohms. And the last color, which is at the other end, is for the tolerance. And let me go back for the tolerance. So you can see that if there is no fourth band, then it's plus or minus 20%. If it's silver, it's plus or minus 10. If it's gold, it's plus or minus 5%. So in this case, it's gold. That means the value of this resistor is 10 plus or minus 5% of 10. Okay? So that's how you theoretically determine the value of the resistance, by looking at the resistor. All right, so now we need to remember some important things when you measure voltages. You have to, first of all, we're going to be usually measuring DC voltages. So like I told you earlier, put it on the DC voltage. And almost always it's going to be below 20 volt. So you can safely put it at 20 volt. Okay, but if you do not know the voltage, always try to put it at the highest. So put it on 20 volt, and that's DC 20 volt. And then remember that whenever you measure voltages, you put the terminals across the component. So if this is a resistance and you're trying to measure the resistance, the voltage across the resistance, if you're trying to measure the voltage across the resistance, then you put the positive on the side of the positive of the battery. or you put the positive terminal, the red, on the higher voltage side, while you put the negative, which is the black, on the lower voltage side. Otherwise, you're going to get a negative reading. Okay, so keep that in mind. And the second thing is that when you measure voltage, you always put the multimeter leads across the component. So you see that is one is on one side, red is on one side, and black is on the other side. So that's how you have to have it when you measure voltages. But when you measure currents, here is the multimeter. As you can see, this is the multimeter. Well, you have to put the selector switch on the current scale first. But the big difference here is that when you measure currents, the multimeter has to be in series in the circuit. It's not across. So the current that you're trying to measure, let's say you're trying to measure the current through this component. So the same current through this component should go through the multimeter, right? Therefore, it has to be connected in series with that, not in parallel, not across. It has to be in series. So keep that in mind. So if you're measuring current, you will have to put it in series. Next step is I'm going to show you how to make 3 measurements. Number 1, measure the voltage of the battery. Okay, measure the voltage of the battery. Number 2, measure the value of the resistance. Number 3, measure the voltage across the resistance. So those are the 3 measurements. Now, I've already connected the circuit, but let me explain that to you. The circuit that you see has been connected. So that is the battery. Make sure that you have the positive of the battery here, the negative is here. So the positive and the negative. Okay. And then this is the positive terminals because this is connected to the positive right there. And one end of this is connected to what is called SW1 because this is a switch. And this switch works only if you keep it pressed down. So as long as it's not, because there's a spring inside. So if it's like this and you don't touch it, it's in the off position. But when you touch it, keep it pressed down, then it's on. So you connect the positive to one end of that switch. And then from SW2, which is this one, SW2, you connect a cable or a wire to this. That is called S3. So that is S3. And from S3, which is actually C3, from C3, you connect a resistance. You can see the resistance here. Connect one end of the resistance to C3 and the other end of the resistance to C7. C7. And then from S7, you take a cable and connect it to S6, right? S7 to S6. And you know these two are connected together. So from C6, you connect a cable all the way back to the negative of the battery. So you see, that's how the circuit is completed. When the switch is kept pressed down, the current is going to flow from the positive, because currents always flow from positive to negative. So that current is going to flow from the positive through this cable, through the switch, through this cable, through the resistance, and into this terminal and back to the negative and through the battery back again. So that's how the circuit is completed. So if you want to measure the voltage across the resistance, which is between these 2 points, you want to measure the voltage across the resistance, you got to take the multimeter, put it on the 20 volt, put it on the 20 volt. So that's what I've done now. So put it on 20 volts. I don't know. Yeah, is that clear? So put it on 20 volt, and then I have put the positive of the multimeter here because that's where the positive of the battery is coming to. Put the negative of the multimeter there because that's connected to the negative. So keep in mind that you cannot switch the positive and the negative of the multimeter. And then press the switch down and check the measurements. So press the switch down and check the measurements. I'm going to get a video of that if possible. So that's there. You can see the multimeter. And you can see it's reading 1.59 volt. So 1.59 volt. Release it and it's 0. So that's how you take the measurement of voltage. Now, if you want to measure resistance, you should make sure that the resistance is not connected in the circuit. Now, in this case, it is connected in the circuit, but as long as you don't keep the switch pressed down, there is no current flowing through the resistance, so that's okay. So next, we're going to measure the resistance. So very important, never measure the resistance when there is a current flowing through it. Okay? So to measure the resistance again, you got to put this on the resistance tab now. Take it to 22 kilo ohms. Because if you read the value of this resistance, you can see it's red, black. No, actually it's brown, black, and brown. So how much is it? Brown. Brown is 1. Black is 0. So you got 10. And then again brown. That means you've got to put one more 0. So that's 100 ohms. So the theoretical value of this resistance is 100 ohms. Let's check if what its value is. Now remember, this is on the kilo ohm scale. So if I put it on the 200 ohms, that will be easier. So you can see that it's 100 ohms now. So see, it's on the 200 ohm and it's actually fluctuating a little bit, but it's 99.9 to 100 ohms. Now, if you want to measure the voltage of the battery, it's simple. Get this off and put this positive on the positive here and the negative on the negative. And, well, got to put this on. Let me put it on 2 volt. Put this on the positive. Put this on the negative. Let it stay there. Okay. So I can now show you. It's on the 2 volt, and you can see that it's 1.619 volt. So that's how I've connected it. It's 1.619 volt. Okay. All right. So next I'm going to show you how to record using the Capstone software. So you got to find out where you have installed Capstone and then turn it on. And then you go to the hardware setup. All right. Before that, you got to turn on the power on the voltage sensor and the current sensor. Turn on the power. You see the blinking Bluetooth there. And then make the connections as I'm showing you right now, making sure that the current is measured in series. So the current sensor must be connected in series and the voltage sensor must be connected in parallel. All right, you can see that now. And after you have connected them, go to the hardware setup. It's on the extreme left. So I think. So now you go to where it says hardware setup here, and it'll search for the wireless devices. There comes up the voltage sensor has been detected and the current sensor, both. Okay, so click on the current sensor. Now the connection is made. You can see that. Do the same thing, click on the voltage sensor. So now both of them have been connected. And now you can click on hardware setup again to hide it. And then go to the sensor data. Click on that, left click on that. And you see that there is time and current already. But we need to measure both current and voltage. Therefore, we can add another y-axis by going up to this tool. There, click on that. It says add new y-axis. So click on that. It adds another y-axis. Go to select measurement and pick voltage, since you already have current. So now time is on the x-axis. You have current on the y-axis on the left side, voltage on the y-axis on the right side. So you have I for current and V for voltage. And after that, all you got to do is go find the record button. But remember to keep the red switch pressed down. Press down on that, hold it there, record, and you can see how both the voltage and the currents are being measured. Click stop. There you have it. You can zoom in on this. You can measure the current. You know the current is in this purple. And then the voltage is in the bluish color. So to get the voltage, you got to zoom in on this axis. Okay, zoom in on this axis. Sorry for that. Zoom in on this axis, and you can see that the voltage was about what? That's about 1.6 volts on this side, on the right side. 1.6 volts. That was the voltage. While the current was here, the current is about 0.015 ampere. That's how you make the measurements of voltage and current. Thank you.